Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. The place of the name in Indian spiritual traditions really can't be overemphasized. Not just spiritual names, but names in general. We know that a lot of practice, mantra practice, kirtan practice, prayer, consists of calling the name of some quality or aspect of God, of the divine. And in this tradition, the name has a much different significance than it does in most Western traditions of naming that we're familiar with. So we have what I call the cascade of becoming, where there's a reservoir of unconditioned consciousness and energy that has infinite potential to produce all different kinds of experiences through producing the experience of form. And as this cascade of becoming is happening, forms are arising and subsiding. And as they're arising, they go from a condition of being more subtle to being more gross. When I say gross, I mean something more tangible and easy to discover. So you can all see each other, presumably, but none of you presumably are seeing deities at this moment. So because deities have more subtle bodies than we do. So it takes an opening of the inner eyes and a relaxing of the senses and an identification of the senses with the divine in order to be able to see deities. You have to become more subtle in your senses to be able to see deities. The name is part of the manifestation of whatever is being named. So along that continuum of becoming is the name. The name of Durga, the name of Shiva, the name of anything. Those names are part of cosmology. They're part of the birthing of the experience of form. And so they are integrally related to whatever it is that we consider to have that name. In our culture, a name might have some relationship to something. You know, most people spend a lot of time picking names for their children, or maybe they try to rename themselves and they pick a name that they like. And we think about names in terms of our ancestral line, or maybe qualities that we want to invoke in our child, right? Those names, though, are not considered, by and large, to really have anything to do with the person being named. They're rather arbitrary. I mean, we have some idea that if we name our kid Peace, she's going to have a different experience than if we name her Gun. Right? We do have that understanding of names, that they have an impact. I said Gun because my best friend in junior high school renamed herself Gun for some reason. I don't really know why. She wanted to be called Gun. You know, back then it made perfect sense, but I don't know why she did that. But in the Indian tradition, the names of God are actually part of God. They're part of the manifestation of God. So that when we call the name, we are actually calling the deity. We are actually calling out those qualities of God to be recognized by us and experienced by us. And in the tantric tradition, of course, we're trying to experience them in ourselves. We're not doing puja or worshiping Ganesha or saying Ganesha's mantras because we want Ganesha to remain something over there that we worship and feel separate from. We want to call forth those qualities of Ganesha. and recognize them in ourselves, those wisdom virtues that he embodies. For instance, he is also an embodiment of the host, just like Lord Shiva. In fact, Ganesha and Shiva, they are basically the same in the tantric tradition. They can be worshipped separately, but Ganesha is a form of Shiva. So, in his big belly, he's holding all worlds. And we want to realize that virtue in ourselves, the ability to host every experience and every form of being. Might take a long time. That's what we have to do a lot of mantra. Call on Ganesha a lot. When we get a spiritual name, the name is also calling out something in us. So a spiritual name is not some sort of a badge of specialness. It's not something you parade around with pride. That would sort of undermine the whole reason for having a spiritual name. But in fact, in this culture, of course, most people have some trouble with their name because other people go, "What? How do you spell that?" So then you have to deal with your embarrassment and your frustration and your pride. And that's a good thing too. Yeah, that's just a side effect though of living in the West. In general though, the name is something that refers to or calls out wisdom virtues in you. So in that sense, the name is sadhana. Hearing the name, hearing people call you that name is similar or analogous to you calling the name of a deity or doing mantra, namavali, calling the different names of different deities. You hear people calling your name, and then those wisdom virtues of that name are called out in you. It works exactly the same way because we live in a call and response world. Kirtan is a gross manifestation of what is happening everywhere at every level of reality. There's a call and response aspect. To whatever extent we're still experiencing duality, or we could just say differentiation, because we can experience differentiation without experiencing duality at some point. But we enjoy that conversation, that call and response aspect. I say something, you say something back. That's basically the pleasure of this reality, is to have that kind of theater of communication happening. So that call and response that we do in Kirtan is precisely the same as what is happening everywhere when you get a response to your action. When you notice that you're being communicated to by nature or by guru or by anything, a friend. And then you respond, right? The name is exactly the same. When you get a spiritual name, it calls something out in you. And that's for you to explore, for you to understand. When I give names, first of all, I basically get them by meditating. And I ask Ma, what should the name be for each person? And sometimes I have different ways of confirming if I got the right name. Sometimes I get it, a name comes and I'm convinced that's not the right name. And I argue with Ma for a while about it, But then I have to relent. It keeps coming back and coming back again. Anyway, and then when people are given the names, that's going to happen at our retreat this week, then I tell the person a little bit about their name, but then it's up to the people who have that name to then go kind of explore and learn more about it and play around with it and make it your own, basically. Right? So when you get a spiritual name, it's very important to use your name. Otherwise, no one's calling you that name, and it's pointless. It's not something that you want to just keep for a select few people. When you get a spiritual name, it's part of what's called, in the tantric tradition, Samaya Diksha. And Samaya means promise or a vow. And basically, you're declaring in front of your spiritual community that this is your tradition. No other tradition is your tradition. Anybody can participate in Jaikul. I don't care if you're Jewish or Christian or Islamic or Baha'i or whatever. You can be whatever you want. And there's absolutely no requirement to give up anything that you're doing in some other religion. But if you take initiation, it's a different story. Because you're really saying that I found my place. I found my path in this life. And that this is my teacher and this is my community and I'm at home now. So the initiation doesn't make that true. Sometimes people come to me and say, I want to get initiated because I think that'll help me to deepen my practice. No. That's not why you get initiated. You get initiated, you're declaring something. You're declaring something that's already the case. You already feel that this is your place, this is your home, this is what you want to do, this is your teacher, this is your practice. And then the initiation just kind of solidifies that. But it has to already be true. There's no magic bullet. And there's no reason to force anything either. No one, like as I said, no one has to feel any particular thing about me or these teachings. You can hang out and sit somewhere in the teachings and just grumble and hate every minute of it. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. But if you're going to be initiated, it's a different story. So the name is really like a rebirth of sorts. But it's not rebirthing you into something brand new. It's rebirthing you into what you have always been and maybe just forgot a little bit. So it's actually bringing you back to more of your essence nature, what you already are. The wisdom virtues that you already have, the essence nature that you already have, but you may have just gotten sidetracked or distracted from. The way that I was taught was that we are going to be unostentatious in our spiritual practice and our spiritual lives. So if you notice, if you hang out with me, you'll notice that when I'm out and about, I always keep my prayer beads inside my shirt. And if I notice they're out, I put them away again. I don't wear malas wrapped around my wrists or all kinds of spiritual accoutrements. This is how I was taught, that you're discreet. Basically, you're discreet, because otherwise, if you're not discreet, you're feeding your pride. So it's the same with the spiritual name. You have to use it if you want it to be part of your practice, but you also don't need to make a big to-do about it. A lot of people who've been around for a while know the story, but there's a lot of new people, so I'll tell it again. Before I was given my first Diksha, my teacher started calling me by a different name, which he said was my name. And I really liked this name, which is always, for someone like me, that was a problem. And I was very proud of it. And when people remarked, if I'd go into a store and say my name is thus and such, and people liked the name, a lot of people thought it was a pretty name, and I would be feeling very proud inside. And then there was the day of initiation, and there was somebody in our community. There's somebody like this in just about every spiritual community I've ever been in. It's someone who has a lot of gatekeeping power and who tries to wield it passively, aggressively against other people. Basically, someone in the hell realm with a lot of gatekeeping power. So this woman said to me in the evening before the morning of the initiation, you might be getting a different name. And I completely freaked out. I think I wrote about this in one of my books, too. I'm not sure. It's sounding familiar. But I really threw a hissy fit. I was sobbing so hard, snot was just coming out of my nose. I couldn't stop crying because I didn't want my name to change. And I went outside. I had to sit under a tree in the yard and sob and snivel. And then I came back in, and I sat down, and my teacher was sitting there, and he looked at me and said, "Are you done?" And then he went like this. And then I went, I started crying. Because I knew, at that moment, what that woman had said was actually the case, that my name was going to change. So, there's more to that story. Right before the initiation, Moments before, my teacher looked down at me very kindly, very compassionately, and said, "You're bigger than any name." And I looked right back at him and went, "I am not!" And I just kept right on crying. Incredible. Actually, the story of the name went on and on and on. There's part 2, but I'll tell that another time. Anyway, so we use our name, but we want to try our best not to develop pride around it. You know, it's especially dangerous if you really like your name. The name that he gave me was Lala, which is a short form that's used to refer to the Yogini Laleshwari, who was a poet in Kashmir. I mean, what could more make my Titan pride rise up and shine, you know? And he was telling me the heads of the lineage, Lala was their favorite poet, and it was really the butter was on the bread and everything. So, but the name that he gave me was Lalita, which is basically the same name, but sort of the Devi name of that. But then later, much later, years later, he gave somebody else the name Sri Lalita. The play of God just continues, right? Yeah, and there's even more to that story. So it was a great teaching throughout many years that went on. It's one way that your name can be a teaching. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.